Okay. Island of the Blue Dolphins, chapter 2 and 3 today. We're going to do two chapters. They're both pretty short. So I'll read, then we'll talk a little bit about them, and hopefully you'll enjoy the story. I like where it goes today. So let me go ahead and share this for you so that you can follow along. You'll also have your own copy of it shared on Google Classroom. So you can click over to that. Try and make this a little bit bigger so we can all see it easier. Captain Orlov and his Aleut hunters moved to the island that morning, making many trips from their ship to the beach of Coral Cove. Since the beach was small and almost flooded when the tide was in, he asked if he could camp on higher ground. This my father agreed to. Perhaps I should tell you about our island, so you will know how it looks and where our village was, and where the Aleuts camped for most of the summer. Our island is 2 leagues long and 1 league wide, and if you were standing on one of the hills that rise in the middle of it, you would think that it looked like a fish, like a dolphin laying on its side, with its tail pointing towards the sunrise, its nose pointing to the sunset, and its fins making reefs and the rocky ledges along the shore. Whether someone did stand there on the low hills in the days when the earth was new, and, because of its shape, called it the Island of the Blue Dolphins, I do not know. Many dolphins live in our seas, and it may be from them that the name came. But one way or another, this is what the island was called. The first thing you would notice about our island, I think, is the wind. It blows almost every day, sometimes from the northwest and sometimes from the east, once in a long while out of the south. All the winds except the one from the south are strong, and because of them the hills are polished smooth, and the trees are small and twisted, even in the canyon that runs down to Coral Cove. The village of Gallas Ott lay east of the hills on the small mesa near Coral Cove and a good spring. About a half league to the north is another spring, and it was there that the Aleuts put up their tents, which were made of skins, and were so low to the earth that the men had to crawl into them on their stomachs. At dusk, we could see the glow of their fires. That night, my father warned everyone in the village of Gallas Ott against visiting the camp. The Aleuts come from a country far to the north, he said. Their ways are not ours, nor is their language. They have come to take Otter and to give us our share in many goods, which they have and which we can use. In this way, we shall profit. But we shall not profit if we try to befriend them. They are people who do not understand friendship. They are not those who are here. They are not those who were here before, but they are people of the same tribe that caused trouble many years ago. My father's words were obeyed. We did not go to the Aleut camp, and they did not come to our village. But this is not to say that we did not know what they did, and what they ate, and in what way they cooked it, how many otter they killed each day, and other things as well, for someone was always watching from the cliffs while they were hunting, or from the ravine when they were in camp. Ramo, for instance, brought news about Captain Orlov. In the morning, when he crawls out of his tent, he sits on a rock and combs until the beard shines like a cormorant's wing, Ramo said. My sister Ulape, who was 2 years older than I, gathered the most curious news of all. She swore that there was an Aleut girl among the hunters. She is dressed in skins just like the men, Ulape said, but she wears a fur cap, and under the cap she has thick hair that falls to her waist. No one believed Ulape. Everyone laughed at the idea that hunters would bother to bring their wives with them. The Aleuts also watched our village. Otherwise, they would not have known about the good fortune which befell us soon after they came. It happened in this way. Early spring is a poor season for fishing. The heavy seas and winds of winter drive the fish into deep water, where they stay until the weather is settled and where they are hard to catch. During this time, the village eats sparingly, mostly from stores of seeds harvested in autumn. Word of our good fortune came on a stormy afternoon, brought by Ulape, who was never idle. She had gone to a ledge on the eastern part of the island, hoping to gather shellfish. She was climbing a cliff on the way home when she heard a loud noise behind her. At first, she did not see what had caused the noise. She thought it was the wind echoing through one of the caves, and was about to leave when she noticed silvery shapes on the floor of the cove. The shapes moved, and she saw that it was a school of large white bass, each one as big as she was. Pursued by killer whales, which prey upon them when seals are not to be found, the bass had tried to escape by swimming towards shore. But in their terror, they had mistaken the depth of the water and had been tossed onto the rocky ledge. Ulape dropped her basket of shellfish and set out for the village, arriving there, so out of breath that she could only point in the direction of the shore. The women were cooking supper, but all of them stopped and gathered around her, waiting for her to speak. "A school of white bass," she said finally. Where? Everyone asked. "On the rocks, a dozen of them, perhaps more than a dozen." Before Ulape had finished speaking, we were running toward the shore, hoping that we would get there in time, that the fish had not hopped back into the sea, or that a chance wave had not washed them all away. We came to the cliff and looked down. The school of white bass was still on the ledge, glistening in the sun. But since the tide was high and the biggest waves were already lapping at the fish, there was no time to lose. One by one, we hauled them out of reach of the tide. Then, two women carrying a single fish, for they were all of about the same size and heavy, we lifted them up the cliff and brought them home. There were enough for everyone in our tribe for supper that night and the next. But in the morning, two Aleuts came to the village and asked to speak to my father. "You have fish," one of them said. "Enough only for my people," my father answered. "You have 14 fish," the Aleut said. "7 now, because we ate 7. "From 7, you can spare 2. "There are 40 in your camp," my father replied, "and more than that of us. Besides, you have your own fish, the dried ones that you brought." "We tire of that kind," Aleut said. He was a short man who only came to my father's shoulders, and he had small eyes like black pebbles and a mouth like the edge of a stone knife. The other Aleut looked very much like him. "You are hunters," my father said. "Go and hunt your own fish if you are tired of what you are now eating. I have my people to think of." "Captain Orloff will hear that you refuse to share the fish." "Yes, tell him," my father said, "but also why we refuse." The Aleut grunted to his companion, and the two of them stalked off on their short legs across the sand dunes that lay between the village and their camp. We ate the rest of the white bass that night, and there was much rejoicing. But little did we know, as we ate and sang, and the older men told stories around the fire, that our good fortune would soon bring trouble at Galisat. All right, we're also going to read chapter 3 because it's very short. So here we go. The wide beds of kelp which surrounded our island on 3 sides came close to the shore and spread out to sea for a distance of a league. In these deep beds, even on days of heavy winds, the Aleuts hunted. They left the shore at dawn in their skin canoes and did not return until night, towing after them their slain otter. The sea otter, when it is swimming, looks like a seal, but it is really very different. It has a shorter nose than a seal, small webbed feet instead of flippers, and fur that is thicker and much more beautiful. It is also different in other ways. The otter likes to lie on its back in the kelp beds, floating up and down to the motion of the waves, sunning itself or sleeping. They are the most playful animals in the sea. It was these creatures that the Aleuts hunted for their pelts. From the cliff, I could see the skin canoes darting here and there over the kelp beds, barely skimming the water, and the long spears flying like arrows. At dark, the hunters brought their catch into Coral Cove, and there on the beach, the animals were skinned and fleshed. Two men, who also sharpened the spears, did this work, laboring far into the night by the light of seaweed fires. In the morning, the beach would be strewn with carcasses, and the waves red with blood. Many of our tribe went to the cliff each night to count the number killed during the day. They counted the dead otter and thought of the beads and other things that each pelt meant. But I never went to the cove, and whenever I saw the hunters with their long spears skimming over the water, I was angry, for these animals were my friends. It was fun to see them playing or sunning themselves among the kelp. It was more fun than the thought of beads to wear around my neck. This I told my father one morning. There are scarcely a dozen left in the beds around Coral Cove, I said. Before the Aleuts came, there were many. Many still live in other places around the island, he replied, laughing at my foolishness. When the hunters leave, they will come back. There will be none left, I said. The hunters will kill them all. This morning, they hunt on the south. Next week, they move to another place. The ship is filled with pelts. In another week, the Aleuts will be ready to go. I was sure that my father thought they would leave soon. For 2 days before, he had sent some of our young men to the beach to build a canoe from a log which he had drifted in from the sea. There are no trees on the island except the small ones stunted by the wind. When a log came ashore, as happened once in a long while, it was always carried to the village and worked on where a chance wave could not wash it away. That the men were sent to hollow out the log in the cove and to sleep beside it during the night meant that they were to watch the Aleuts, to give an alarm should Captain Orloff try to sail off without paying us for the otter skins. Everyone was afraid he might. So besides the men in the cove who watched the Aleut ship, others kept watch on the camp. Every hour someone brought news. Ulape said that the Aleut woman spent a whole afternoon cleaning her skin aprons, which she had not done before, while she had been there. Early one morning, Ramos said he had just seen Captain Orloff carefully trimming his beard so that it looked the way it did when he first came. The Aleuts who sharpened the long spears stopped this work and gave all their time to skinning the otter, which were brought in at dusk. We in the village of Galas Ott knew that Captain Orloff and his hunters were getting ready to leave the island. Would he pay us for the otter he had slain? Or would he try to sneak away in the night? Would our men have to fight for our rightful share? These questions everyone asked while the Aleuts went about their preparations. Everyone except my father, who said nothing, but each night worked on the new spear he was making. All right, so chapter 2. It starts off by talking about leagues, the 2 leagues. This is usually used when it comes to boats and sailing. It's a length of space usually used to measure distance across the water. Not always. It's just a way to measure distance. But so it says that the island is 2 leagues long and 1 league wide. So if you do a little bit of math here, it means the island is almost 7 miles long and 3.5 miles wide. So not very big. All right, this of course is not on an island, but the mesa, those of you that speak Spanish, you know it means table. When we talk about rocks, the mesa is that flat surface at the top of a rock. All right, a ravine is like a canyon that's kind of cut into the rock. So here's a picture of a ravine with a river flowing at the bottom. The cormorant is a seabird, and it has very black, shiny feathers. And so it talked about the cormorant and the feathers. Tents, which were made of skins. Here's an example of what the tent might have looked like. Skins, of course, skins of animals of some sort. All right, the school of large white bass. A school in this context, when we talk about fish, a school is like the group of fish. And bass is a type of fish. And I understand bass fish can be huge. So when it says they only had 14, we're talking about huge fish, like huge. So if that's what they caught, then it could feed quite a few. All right, talked about the killer whale and how it was chasing the bass. So you might know it as an orca. All right, and then a ledge and the rocky shelf on the side of the island. All right, they were rejoicing because they had all this food and it was good. All right, so they're good fortune. This is good. Oh, look at this free food. We didn't have to do anything. We just got all these fish. But it would soon bring trouble. So this is foreshadowing something bad is going to happen. It's good now. But remember, she's telling us this story and she says something bad is going to happen. All right, kelp. If you've ever been to the ocean, it's the seaweed. And here on California, the coast especially, you can have really thick, what we call forests of kelp. And at the top of the water, the surface of the water, you can see all of these kelp, branches essentially floating on the surface. And the sea otters will just kind of sit on top of them and float in the water. So cute. On the left side, we have the sea otter. On the right side, we have the seals. So they are similar, but they are also different creatures, and that's what she talks about. All right, carcass. Carcass is a word for a dead thing. Okay, whether it's usually an animal, it's the dead body of the animal. So the carcasses of the dead otters. Kind of sad. All right, a canoe. That's what they're trying to make out of the log, and what they've got is the boat. To sneak. They keep sneaking. All right. So with that said, hopefully you enjoyed the chapter, and we will continue reading as the days go on. And hope you enjoyed it. All right. So take care.